This is really difficult if the camera is mirrored. Ah! Okay, this is fine. Hey guys, what is going on? My name is Virtual Riot, and I realized I recorded a lot less studio time if I always have to go get my cool camera, so I just wanted to do something real quick, so I'm just going to use my webcam and you'll have to live with that, I'm sorry. So, a couple days ago I posted this pack of audio effect racks on my Patreon, and I've already recorded a whole video about all of those, explaining them and explaining how to make them yourself pretty easily. But there was one thing I just wanted to show you right now real quick that I was talking about on my Twitter last night, and it goes like this. So I think it is safe to say that we all know that two EQ peaks or two filter peaks moving towards each other in the middle of the frequency spectrum creates some kind of vowel-y oi sound. Here an example with just some white noise through this filter. And depending on where they meet or how far their range is, the vowel sounds a little bit different. So far, so good. Next up, I was experimenting with Ableton's arpeggiator and trying out all kinds of other playing methods that it has. So by default, if you just throw an arpeggiator on a sine wave, I'm going to do this here, that sounds kind of soften this off just a little bit. All right, let's grab an arpeggiator from the MIDI effects. And by default, the style it's playing the notes that are coming in is up. So I'll just go like... This is the chord I'm sending it, so this is a big boy chord. There's like a D sharp minor pentatonic chord. And if it goes up, then it sounds like this. I should probably turn that noise off. So it's repeating this one time because of this step control here. And this one repetition is going to be plus 12 semitones upwards, so 1 octave. I'm going to turn that off. And then we're going to look into some other playing styles here. So we got down, we got up, down up and down, down and up. I think we have all of those covered now. No, they're like slightly different. You'll see it when you try them out. But the interesting one here is converge, diverge, and con and diverge. So converge means it starts on the outside of whatever chord you're holding, and then works its way towards the middle. Diverge is the opposite, starts in the middle, works its way outwards. But con and diverge just gives you like a in and out. And you might be able to see where I'm going with this now. So I'm do the con and diverge, and now I'm gonna speed this arpeggiator up by a lot. And let's add an EQ so we can see the frequency spectrum. Those are two peaks moving closer to each other in the middle of the frequency spectrum, and it sounds like a yaoi, but it's made out of sine waves that are playing a minor pentatonic scale. I already thought that was pretty cool. And you can play around with this. You can sort of decide where these two are supposed to meet. So they're going to meet like in the middle of this chord. So if you add some extra notes on the top, then that middle point is going to be shifted a little bit upwards. If you remove some or you add some low notes, then that middle point where they meet is going to be shifted downwards. Just to show you, I'm just going to add like this whole shebang up here one more time. And then now it's meeting at 1K, which is kind of a ah type vowel. So we get a yai. We can make this even faster. And even faster. And then the gate here just means that, let's say this is on 16th notes, it just means that it's gonna hold the 16th note for the entire length of a 16th note if this is at 100 or 99%, but if this is really low, then it's just gonna play tiny notes. So if you set this to super fast, those notes are gonna be really short, so you might wanna crank up the gate a little bit, otherwise... Like, it sounds like a yai, but I can't hear those notes anymore. With a little more gate, with like a longer gate, you can kind of still hear that they're playing some sort of chord. So this is the basic concept, but now there is another level to this. Alright, so keep that arpeggiator technique in the back of your mind. So next up, I was just trying to find ways to colorize bass in other ways than just using retune or pitch map. And I do like the sound of resonators, but it's like, it's pretty easy to tell when you're using it, and it kind of can sound samey, so I was trying to like build my own little effects, and I was just trying stuff out and just to see what it sounds like. So here I got a big effects chain on this group here that is basically creating a resonator that can be triggered by MIDI down here. These groups here are all EQs, where all of the points here are like on the note C on like 8 different octaves. Then we got like every note in an octave here. And linked to the gain of each of these individual points are MIDI envelopes on this track down here. So if I play a chord here in any size, doesn't matter, that it's turning on the matching EQ peaks of the frequencies of those notes. This does take some time to set up. This is a little bit tedious, I know, but I just wanted to see where this goes. So you find these envelopes under MIDI effects up here, envelope MIDI, and then you can just put them on a MIDI track or before an instrument on a MIDI track, and then you can link them to any other thing in your project, even on other channels, on other tracks. And you have like 8 modulation slots available. So what does this sound like? I've got a drum loop here. By default, this sounds like this. And then with the MIDI triggered resonator EQ, so you can kind of see these peaks coming in and out depending on what chord the MIDI down here is playing. And I prefer to just keep this chain on a group instead of putting it on like an individual Serum or something, because as you can see, this is giving me 30% CPU, and this is the only thing in this project, so I just want to be able to like throw stuff into this group if I want to give something this type of resonator effect. So now the annoying thing is, though, these peaks don't really react to the incoming audio. They're just like either on or off. The nice thing is you do have control over like their attack and decay and release time, because I've mapped all the macros from all of these envelope MIDI things to this macro area over here. So let's say if I turn the release down and the sustain all the way down, we've got like a decay of, let's say, 250, 260. Then it's just giving those a little spike whenever these notes are hit. So now I could say, maybe I put an arpeggiator before this whole controller section here, just to have like a rhythm happening while I'm just holding down chords. So what might work is, let's see, what do we have here? We have an arpeggiator on chord trigger. Ignore this velocity thing for now. So this is set to 16th notes. That means this should turn into like a stabby 16th note pattern. Let's check the EQ peaks. Yep, works. Let's just slow this down to 8th notes and give it a little more release. Nice. Actually, maybe a little less. I just want it to be really stabby. Cool. So that works. That's kind of cool, especially since you could now, if you have like a held thing, like let's use the Serum bass up here. This does have a bit of a rhythm. Let me just like load up just a sustained. So this is kind of cool. Now you can hear the rhythm of these peaks on top of this bass sound. And I can say, maybe I want the dry signal be a little quieter, the wet one be a little louder. And I've put some extra processing behind this EQ area, like behind this self-made EQ resonator, so you get a little bit of like chorus and a little bit of reverb stuff. So you get something like that. There's also a little tone shift here. I put an EQ at the start here. Everything goes through this EQ before it goes into the self-made resonator, and this macro just tilts it up or down to like focus on high and low frequencies. There's a little extreme. I just want you to be able to hear what this is adding. So that's cool. And then you could also, just like before, use an arpeggiator on converge and diverge, and then work with that to get this yaw effect imprinted with EQ peaks on top of an already existing sound. So that's what we have over here. I layered a couple of arpeggiators, which is also something you can do and it's pretty awesome. But let's set just this one to on and set it to con and diverge. I'm gonna make it pretty fast. And let's see what we got here. I'm gonna turn the wetness off. That's cool. So now we have this color yaw on top of our bass. So you can play around a little bit with these control envelopes to shape this resonator, like how it's supposed to decay a little bit, but I like this, but if these peaks in the EQ would actually react dynamically to the loudness of whatever is coming in, instead of just being turned on and off, this would sound even better, and it would like match the original sound way more, instead of just sounding like, oh, it's just like put on top of it. So I want this color layer to interact with the bass. It doesn't sound too bad. This is like a different preset that kind of wobs along. It's not bad, but especially if you, let's say we're not automating this, but just holding chords. I better turn the sustain all the way up. Okay, that is very loud in general. I'm gonna turn this down here. Like, that's just That sounds cool, but a little bit too boring, a little bit too static. So next I built this beautiful thing, which is the same concept, but as you can hear, it's reacting dynamically. So here we again have a peak for like every note, sort of, in a scale. All these EQs are in series this time. I just wanted to see if that sounds any different. But you can see they react dynamically. And what is happening here is every single point is linked to its own envelope follower in this group over here, which you can't hear because I've deactivated it here, but the audio still goes through and still moves these envelope followers. And before each envelope follower is a really thin EQ filter that'll make sure that only frequencies in this range are gonna be affecting the gain of an EQ peak that is exactly at that position. Not only is this completely over-engineered and was an absolute chore to build, it's also really bad for your CPU, as you can see. And not only that, it also now takes several decades to open your project files if this is in it. It does sound really nice though, and then I had to figure out a way to make this a little more efficient. I'm gonna put all of these on my Patreon, by the way, so you can like try them all out, but with this one, be especially careful. You might think your Ableton crashed if you're trying to load it, because it really takes some time. This is an M3 Mac, and it took minute and a half. And it also takes a long time if you remove them. Like if you have one of those insane racks that say high CPU on them, and you just delete them off a track, get ready to wait like a minute for whatever reason. It just takes that long. But cool, here we have again a couple of macro controls like widening. I'm just gonna turn off the dry signal for now so you can just hear the wet. This decay time is like, yeah, the decay time for all these envelope followers. And all these envelope followers, their gain, like how loud the audio is going to come into these and how much that is going to affect the EQ points, that is controlled here by all these MIDI envelopes again. So this is how I select which peaks are supposed to receive signal, and then the signal is going to be evaluated by the envelope followers, and then that value is given to all these individual EQ peaks. And before the tracking, I just call it the tracking, like the volume tracking here, is another like tilt EQ. So you can kind of tell it, hey, I want more focus on the low or more focus on the high end, which is pretty neat. Because and overall tracking power as well. So I'm gonna turn this to the left, and it should go a little more towards the low frequencies. And the other way. Yay, works. Also got Q. Still has kind of a cool sound, even with a pretty wide Q, where it's not super sharp resonator peaks, but... And of course you can again just put an arpeggiator before the MIDI controller area here. I'm gonna just turn all of those off again and just use a diverge and converge one again. Con and diverge. Make you pretty fast. There we go. All right, and then let's make this a little brighter, back to normal. Might have to increase the tracking power. Oh, and the Q. So you can kind of hear kind of, so there's something happening there. I'm just going to shift all of these down one octave so that the meeting point of these is a little more centered. Nice. So now we're getting somewhere. And just to show you like that it's even cooler if you have multiple arpeggiators on top of each other. I'm just going to duplicate this one and still keep it at con and diverge, but I'm going to make this one a little faster. Nice. We can even post-process just this wet signal a little bit now. Like it's already getting some chorus, but you could go a little crazier at this point then and say, hey, I want to first off cut off unnecessary low end, and then maybe run it through, why not Redux? And I feel like both the rate sounds pretty dope. You can obviously add reverb or delay. The bit crush is actually also kind of neat. cool, but wildly inefficient. I'm still gonna put this on the Patreon, but let me show you my my final solution. This doesn't sound good when a German says that, right? So then my next idea was to conserve a little bit of CPU power to not have like an individual envelope follower for each and every single EQ point, because that's like a lot for the computer to do it at once. I kind of just broke the frequency spectrum up into 8 equally sized areas. So these are all like about an octave in width. And then the volume of just this area goes to one envelope follower, and then this envelope follower controls the gain of all the EQ peaks that any of these notes do in that area. So it's like a less higher resolution volume tracking, but it's still there. And since you're still only hearing the notes that you're playing in the MIDI down here, it kind of works and it doesn't sound that much different. So this is pretty neat. This MIDI down here now, there are still envelope MIDIs here, and they just turn the corresponding EQ peaks on and off. So you can kind of see them popping in and out of existence when I play this. So that's pretty cool. Sounds nice and dynamic, like absolutely fine. I put a little tilt EQ before the tracking, so you still have the ability to like tone low high, to like focus a little more on the low frequencies or on the high frequencies. And so we got some control over the sound. There's a little bit of wetness here as well. Maybe a little darker, then we got this. So that's pretty neat, I like that. And then I thought, hey, okay, cool, now I can do this like converge and diverge arpeggiator thing, right? By just putting a set of arpeggiators that just do that kind of stuff in front of my MIDI controller. And it does work, but let me just solo the wet signal here. Like, I love how that sounds, but when these points pop in and out of existence, you kind of hear a little crackle in the back. Together with the dry signal, you can't hear them as much. And I like how that sounds. You can still process the wet signal, maybe give it a little bit of a high cut to get rid of those clicks, but I wanted to find a way that was even more elegant and wouldn't cause any clicks. I was actually rather surprised that I can do this much easier, but I still like the EQ method because it has its own sounds a little bit different. So my idea was like having these points turn on and off is kind of what is creating that click. But if they move around quickly while they're on, it's not really creating any of these pops. And if I'm holding down a big chord here on the MIDI track, this is just sending that chord to an arpeggiator, but the arpeggiator is just giving out one note at a time, right? It like turns it into a monophonic melody. Yes, it's going to be like 4 different melodies here, all using that because I have 4 arpeggiators in a row, but each of them just plays one note at a time, unless you have them set to something like chord trigger. So then I thought maybe I can map, like the expression control from the MIDI effects, I can map the key tracking once it comes out of the arpeggiator to the frequency of these EQ points. And then I had like 4 different EQ points here, 4 different arpeggiators here, and so now they just chase across the frequency spectrum like this. Like, it works surprisingly well. Also, their gain is linked to some tracking volume envelopes, envelope followers over here again, where I'm also using like this weird thing. This point goes wherever this EQ peak over here is going, but this is creating a notch, and then that notched dry signal is being mixed with a phase inverted dry signal, so you're left with like a bandpass in this area. So the peak in the resonator EQ is always reacting to the volume of whatever is happening in the area of this. If you really wanted to, you could even duplicate this type of EQ onto the dry signal to notch out the like little harmonics you're putting in with that resonator, but it sounds fine like this. I don't think it's necessary. So that's pretty cool. At this point, I'm kind of just like adding sine waves on top again. So we're kind of back where we started with the Serum sine waves creating a yaw. Why not just do that and put this on top of this? It's because I wanted to react dynamically to the volume of whatever basses or whatever else I'm putting through it. But since these are kind of just sine waves, I tried the same thing with just using Ableton's stock spectral resonator. So you can send MIDI to that. So this is getting MIDI from MIDI 6 down here. Again, a MIDI track with some arpeggiators on it doing fun stuff. And then you gotta make sure to turn these harmonics just to 1. So you just get 1 harmonic, just the fundamental, just a sine wave. And then that sounds and looks like this. I'm gonna turn some of these off, so we just have one arpeggiator because it's a little much going up. But this is okay. This is on con and diverge. Oh, I've linked all the gates to a macro for some reason. So this is on con and diverge. Now we're just gonna see and hear that one. And it draws cool little X's, so that's fun. And this sounds pretty similar to doing it just with these moving EQ peaks. And up here. For some reason, the EQ peaks give me a slightly cleaner result, but it's very, very similar, so it doesn't really matter. Also, both of these techniques are way nicer to your CPU. Like, this is both running together, and this is at not even 10%, so we've made some improvements. And then I felt like you could still post-process this wet signal, like just those sine waves. And first of all, you have some controls over them with the spectral resonator now. You can make them unison, you can detune those a little bit. So that's pretty neat. Then I made a little chain here with some overdrive, saturation, and bit crusher. A little bit of bit crush, a little bit of sample rate reduction. Cool. Still might need some EQing or compressing on those added colory sine waves. And then I also wanted to try, so if I have the decay pretty long here, kind of like this, now we get just straight up X's, which looks pretty sick. Sorry for the clipping. So that's pretty cool. Those X's look really sick too, but now it's like really sustained. Maybe that's cool, maybe that's what you want, but I went ahead and just added like another chain here, turned it off so we can't hear it, but the signal is still going through this EQ and to this envelope follower. And then this is set from 0 to 50% and mapped to a utility at the end of this whole chain. So this thing over here is only reacting to the volume of the dry signal minus the sub, because sometimes, especially with basses, you know, the sub might be a little more sustained, and then this tracking of the volume might be a little just continuous and not as dynamic. So yeah, these are two other ways to do this, and the cool thing is, if you do this utility kind of thing, where you put the utility at the end and have it react, you could also do this with the gate, I know, and then sidechain the gate to the dry signal, but I kind of like this a little bit more because, I don't know, I have like some faster control over attack and release, which are like rise and fall over here, and I just like the visualization of it more. But once you have something like this set up, you can also add all kinds of like, let's say, delays or reverbs before that, because no matter how messy it's going to get over here, the utility volume automation is just going to make sure that it stays tight together with the dry signal. So I added some like grain delay here. Let me make this just a little bit shorter again. So pretty. Maybe add a little bit of that distortion. Nice. And now with that utility. Beautiful. And maybe shift these down. Oh, actually don't have to shift these down an octave now if you want to try lower octaves, or even a different pitch, because in the spectral resonator you can just go shift, arrow down, and then you have the transpose control here. Neat. I really like that. One last thing I want to show you is, so if you're using multiple arpeggiators, obviously it's really cool to just set them maybe even to different styles, slightly different tempos, so you have like all these patterns going in and out of phase, and as you might know, that's one of my favorite things to play around with at the moment. But you can also kind of make it just one shape but a little more intense by doing the following things. So I have this arpeggiator on con and diverge, making that little X for us, really nice. And now I'm just going to duplicate this and set this offset here to 1. So this arpeggiator is going to do the same as the other one, but it's going to start one step later. So now you have like 2 sine waves at once. And then this one is going to start a little bit later as well, just another step, and this one starts another step, and I'm going to do a 5th one, starts another step later. So now it should, instead of being like 2 sine waves that go meet in the middle and then diverge again, you should have 5 that move forward. And you'll see that this is a little bit bigger now. That sounds a little bit nicer. And then if you want more chaos and more variation, just give these all different speeds. Like, let's do this one 48, this one 32, this one on 24, and this one on 16. And then you get all kinds of cool patterns here in this visualizer as well. And of course, you can try other stuff with the spectral resonator as well, like increase the harmonics, so you have more of a like saw type sound, or Or if you move the stretch from 0 to 100%, it turns into odd harmonics. More like a square wave. That's actually pretty neat too. Yay! I love it! I'm gonna put this project file into the folder on Patreon as well, and I hope you all have fun messing around with this. Yeah, if those other ones, so all these other ones with like the tons of envelope followers are gonna be on the Patreon as well, but it says high CPU on them, and use them carefully. I don't want you to break your project files if you like drag those into an already big project file and then it just becomes unusable or your computer crashes or you aren't able to open the project file ever again. Just be careful. But these two techniques, for example, are gonna be easy and should work. I'm going to put this as a project file into that folder as well, and then if you want to use this technique in your project, like you can take this project file with the color EQ or key tracking, reso EQ, spectral resonator, you can just drag that, you don't have to open it, just drag it into a project you're working on, and then you should get these two groups. Alternatively, you can say, hey, I only want the spectral one, so spectral reso ARP. I'm just going to save this like this, and then you can just drag this entire group into your user library, and then let's look, spectral reso ARP, there you are, and then just go into your project, just drag this in, and it should come with everything included. Even automations get copied like this, effects chains, everything. So this is a nice way to easily load this into whatever project you're working on, or if you want to like add this effect to a sound, because it does require like the MIDI track with this stuff on it, and then an audio track with this other stuff on it, or in this case, I like to put the whole thing on the group sometimes, just to save processing power, and then I can run multiple things through that. But yeah, I can't just save it as an audio effect track or an instrument effect track because it's on two separate tracks. So yeah, have fun with this, and let me know if you got any problems with it. I'll check my Patreon for like any comments of if technical difficulties happen or if something doesn't open, so just let me know. All right, have a nice day. Bye!